Greetings, super friends. Jonathan Levy here, and stick around because in this video I'm going to talk about one of the most hot topics in the accelerated learning field, which is how to learn languages faster. One of the topics that my students most ask me is that of language learning. How can we learn languages faster? Because after all, of all the things that people try to learn, languages are probably one of the broadest and biggest topics that you can take on. I mean, you have the vocabulary, you have the grammar, you have pronunciation, you have diction, and in fact, in the coming months, we'll be doing a language learning challenge with one of my favorite language learning experts, GABRIEL WYNER, where he talks about how to break all these things down. Now, over the years and through learning 4 languages, I have come up with a bunch of different thoughts and ideas on the strategies that you can use to dramatically learn a language, not in years, but potentially even months, at least to get to a conversational level. Now, I'm not going to talk so much in this lecture about vocabulary because you can see our other YouTube videos on how to learn vocabulary quickly using things like visual mnemonics and memory palaces. And you can actually learn many thousands of words in a very short amount of time just using these techniques. In fact, in my most recent book, The Only Skill That Matters, I talk about how this can almost be a detriment to you if you learn too much vocabulary and don't pair it with a good enough understanding of the diction and of the actual grammatical structure and rules of the particular language. Now, Tim Ferriss has done some really interesting work on this in listing out all of the different potential questions that you might want to ask when you are going to learn a language. And more specifically, what I like in the way that he does it is he actually has a list of sentences that he will have people translate for him. And using those sentences, he'll be able to start to deconstruct the actual structure and grammatical rules of the language. Now, I would just add on to that there are a couple different things that I want to go ahead and ask people when I'm somewhere like in Japan or in Korea, and I'm trying to understand really how the structure of the language works. The first one is I want to understand the basics, the grammatical basics. So, is there male, female, and neuter? Are there different levels of respect and addressing? For example, many languages have as many as 4 or even 5 different levels of respect that you need to use in the language. And this can express itself in the use of different pronouns, such as the Spanish usted versus tú, the Russian "the" as opposed to using the, more informal. And it can even express itself in kind of ends of sentences. So what I'm learning as I'm traveling here in Japan and in Korea is that there are different ends to end sentences and different ways to build your sentences based on the level of respect that is due to that other person. Now, a couple other grammatical rules that you might want to know include what is the conjugation structure, right? Are words conjugated for different pronouns like they would be in Spanish or Russian? Very important. How many times are there? Do you have past, present, and future? Do you have, like in English, all different kinds of weird times like past perfect, past participle? Really important to understand those so that you can navigate them. In addition to all that, you also need to know if it's a Slavic language, Germanic language, is there also declension? Because in a lot of different languages, you have actual grammatical conjugation, you also have declension, which is something that won't make a lot of sense to people who don't understand a Slavic or Germanic language yet, but it's really important. In fact, as I detail in my book, if you don't take into consideration declension, you can actually get into a lot of trouble when trying to learn the language. So those are a few of the rules that I try to understand whenever I'm picking up a new language. I try to understand what are the different genders that I need to know, the different times, and on top of all those different things, I try to understand sentence structure. You see, some languages, like English, have a very fixed sentence structure. Subject, verb, object. I go to the mall on Sundays. very simple, SVO. But in a lot of languages, it's either spun around. For example, I'm picking up that in Japanese, it seems to be spun around, or it's completely loose and doesn't actually matter. Now, once I understand these rules, sometimes I will ask for example sentences like the ones that Tim Ferriss does. For example, I have an apple. I want an apple. I give him an apple. She gives her an apple, and on and on and on. And that will help me understand more of the grammatical structure. Now, once I understand those bigger, broader grammatical rules, I'll also try and understand if there are any kind of weird, little, strange rules that don't seem to fit in the other broader category. For example, in Hebrew, we have this weird situation where I can't say directly, I see Molly. I have to say, I see et Molly. So strange little rules like that. In French, the way that the negation is handled, je ne sais pas, adding the pas on the end of sentences creates this negation. I'll try and understand some of those weird little rules, which are similar in a way to the additions of nida or gozaimasu in Japanese, but have to do with the grammatical structure of the language. In fact, there are even some languages like Russian where SVO doesn't matter. You can say store go to I go to the store. Any particular combination works in certain languages. So it's really important to understand if the language has that rigid structure, and if so, what it is. Once I understand that structure, if I'm really trying to learn the language and actually investing time and energy, I'll do something that I don't think a lot of other people do, which is I will actually commit the grammatical structure and the rules of that structure, for example, the declension, to a memory palace. Again, very, very few people do this. We teach it in our SuperLearner masterclass, and it's a very, very advanced tactic to actually encode grammatical rules, things like conjugation, declension, times and tenses, all into a memory palace in the same way that you would use a memory palace to learn things like vocabulary. So those are a few of my tips and hacks to better understand languages, whether I'm trying to do so really quickly for fun while I travel throughout Asia, or if I'm trying to really actually learn a language and get to a level where I can converse and communicate in that language. Hope you guys really enjoyed the video. If you do, please make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below letting me know your favorite tips for learning languages.